Hello everyone, today we are going to make a tutorial about the tools included on Marker Plus. As we saw on previous videos, Marker Plus is different with Lite because it includes tools to create its own signals and filters. On Marker Plus we have these extra indicators where the most important are these two, the crossover detector and the slope detector. On the crossover detection tool, we can detect the cross of any pair of lines. Those lines can be on the main panel or on the secondary panel, and it can be between two lines or between a line and a constant line. For example, if we want to detect the crossover of this line against the zero line, or for example on an oscillator where we want to detect the crossover with an overbought or an oversold. And now we are going to view examples of all the cases. Let's say that we want to detect the crossovers on this MACD, and we want to detect the cross between the MACD and its average line. We have two ways to do the same. One is looking for the cross between these two lines, the MACD and the average, and the difference is the difference between both lines. So when there is a crossover, this difference is equal to 0. So to detect that crossover, we can also detect the cross of difference against 0. Let's see both methods. First of all, we need to copy both lines. For that we use the copy indicator. We assign a name to the variable, for example MACD, and then we select the indicator and the line that we want to copy. So we select a MACD with the same parameters used on the chart, and we select the name of the line, on this example MACD. We can see that we get a new panel with the copied line. We can overlap over the MACD panel, which is the panel number 2, and now both lines are overlapped one each other. We can select a different plot style, like for example dots, so we can also see the copied line. And now we do the same with the other line, the average. We select a name for this line. We can select any name. On the input series, we look for the indicator with the parameters, and we select the correct line. On this example, it is the average. And I will select a different color with dots, and instead of placing it at the bottom, we will overlap it with the original MACD. So we select the panel number 2, and now that we have both lines copied, we can delete the original lines if we want, and now we can use the crossover indicator and we select the names of the lines that we want to check. One of the name is MACD and the other is AVG, average. So we place those names, MACD, average, and the result is the difference between both lines. So we can select another name for this result. We get a histogram with the difference. On this example, it is equal to the histogram of the MACD because the histogram is just that, the difference between the MACD and the average. This indicator, instead of taking the difference between both lines, it also and store that value into a variable. It can also paint signals, crossover to the upside and to the downside. We can disable one of the crossovers, so we only get the crossover to the upside. And we can also add a threshold, how much one line must cross the other to be considered as a crossover. To have an idea of the best threshold to use, we can look at the histogram. If we add a threshold of 1, I will start with different values from 0.1, 0.5, on 0.5 we can see that we get 1 bar before changing the trend. Let's use a bigger threshold, for example 2, so it is more evident the difference. Now it is visible the difference. The arrows are much more delayed, and if we look at the histogram we can see that to change from long to short we wait for at least 2 bars, and then to change to long this peak is not enough, it is 1.92, so only on this bar we get the crossover signal. This is the use for the threshold. We can filter noise, but also we get a delay on the signals. On this example we can see an example of noise. So with this method we copy the MACD, copy the average, each one with a different name, and then we use the crossover between both line names. This distance stored on this variable name can be used later for a filter. We can see examples later in this video. Another method, the second method, I will remove all this example. The other method is using the difference line of the MACD. So we check the crossover between the Diff line, the histogram, and the 0 line. So we only need to copy one line. This same setup is also valid for the CCI, where we can check the cross by 0 or by an overbought or oversold level. First we need to copy the MACD, the difference the diff. I will copy the diff line from the MACD, the histogram. So we select the indicator MACD with the same parameters, but we copy the line diff. I will use dot plot style, and we can overlap it over the MACD, so we can check that we have the same values. Now we want to detect the crossovers of the diff line and 0. 0 is a constant, same as an overbought or oversold value. So to put a constant value, we need to use the constant indicator. We assign a name, for example 0, and a value 0. We don't get nothing on the picture, but we have the variable 0 with a value of 0. So now we are ready to use the crossover indicator between these two variables, diff and 0. And the result, let's assign a name diff minus 0. We let enable both crossover signals, and now we get the same signals as we got before, but with a different procedure. When the histogram crosses by 0, which is the same place where the MACD crosses with its average, we get an arrow. We can use the same configuration with the CCI. Let's remove everything, and let's say that we want to detect and signal when the CCI crosses by 0, for example. So we copy the CCI, let's assign the name CCI, and on the input series we find the indicator. It only has one plot, so we don't have nothing to select, and we can select a color and a plot style. I will overlap with the panel number 3, so now we can see the dots over the original line, and now again we need a constant. I will use the constant indicator, again assign the variable name to 0 with a value of 0, and now we can use the crossover indicator between CCI and 0. The name for the result, for the histogram, is CCI minus 0. At the bottom we can see the histogram with the distance between both lines. It is positive when CCI is over 0, negative when it is below. And we can also see the crossovers. Here we can see that we can use a threshold to avoid this noise. I will remove the MACD so we have more space. If we apply a threshold, this number goes between 0 and 200, so we can use a threshold of 100 to see what happens. And now we can see that we avoid this peak because it is not enough to reach 100. So we don't get a long signal on the first peak, only on the second. If instead of this we want to signal a crossover between the CCI and the OverBought, let's say for example when it goes from above 200 to below 200, then we need to have a variable with the OverBought value. On this case will be 200. Same for the oversold. We need a variable with the oversold set to minus 200. For this example we can use a smaller number so we get more signals. Let's say for example an overbought of 100 and an oversold of minus 100. So we need two constants, overbought with a value of 100 and oversold with a value of minus 100. And now we want to detect the crossovers between CCI and those levels. So we use the crossover indicator between CCI and OverBought, and the result is another histogram. Let's assign the name CCI minus OverBought, and if we let both signals enabled, we get both signals painted when it goes above and then when it comes again below. I will use triangle ups and triangle downs for the signals. I will replace the triangles by vertical lines so it is easier to understand. This green vertical line is when the CCI crosses above the OverBought, and the red is when it is coming below the OverBought, the 100. Depending on what we need to do, we may need one or the other. Usually the most useful is the coming from above OverBought line. Let's say that we change the value of the constant, where we define the OverBought instead of 100. If we change it to 200, then this red line should move to this other place, and now this is our OverBought value, 200. On the crossover indicator we can select which of the signals we want to show. If we only want to show the crossovers to the downside, this is the more useful, or to the upside, or both. The same happens with the indicators over the main panel. I will remove this CCI so we have more space. This line is a T3. If we want to detect the crossover with the other line, which also is a T3, then we need to copy both of them. So we use the copy indicator, assign a name, let's say T3. We select the indicator on the input series parameters. We find the T3 with a period of 14. This will be the slow. I will change the plot style to dots and overlap over the main panel. So now we could delete the original line because we don't need it anymore. Now I will copy the other T3, for example T3 fast with a period of 7. With a different color and also with the dot plot style overlapping the main panel. Now we have the two lines copied into markers variables, so we are ready to use the crossover indicator between T3 and T3 fast. The result is the difference, so we can assign this name, and we get the histogram with the distance between both lines. It is positive because the blue line is over the yellow, but the signals are on the opposite direction. That may be because I placed the lines on the wrong order, because I want to check the crossover of the fast against the slow. Yes, so we need to change the order, the fast against the slow. And now we have the correct signals. This is an uptrend and then a downtrend. We can also use the distance taken by the crossover indicator to define a trend or a logic condition. On markers we have a filter which is usually disabled by default, but we can enable, and we have a condition to enable longs and shorts. So we can specify a variable with its limits to allow a long signal. On this example, the variable that we have is this histogram. Let's say that we assign an easier name, slope for example, or trend, and we only want to go long when trend is positive. For that, on marker plus we set the variable name equal to trend, and the conditions for long, I want a minimum of 0, so I want it to be positive. We don't need to specify a maximum. And to go short, the same variable, we don't specify a minimum, but we specify a maximum of 0, so it must be negative to go short. And now we can see the result of the filter at the upper right corner. The result of this filter is only enabled when we get an incoming tick. So only at the following incoming tick this result is updated. We are not connected, and we can enable or disable the filter from the toolbar. For example, we can have a signal and a filter different one from the other, and even the filter can be defined from another chart. Let's say that we have a different chart. The variables used by markers are global, so all the charts share the same variables, so the variables cannot be assigned, the same variable cannot be assigned from two places at the same time. So if we assign the trend variable, which was used on the other chart, we get this error because the variable is already in use. We get an error on this chart, and on this chart maybe we get an error if we refresh the chart. So we need to assign only one variable. We only can use assign one variable or one time. As the variables are available on all the charts, that means that all the variables created on the back chart are present on this chart, so we can use them as a filter or for anything. Let's say that we have markers, and we can use as a filter condition the values assigned on the other chart. So we can use the trend variable as a filter condition, and this filter was assigned with the result of other chart. We can paint the values of any variable with the paint indicator. For example, if we want to know the value of trend, that should be equal to the other chart. That means that, for example, let's say that we have a condition on this chart. For example, we have these two lines copied, but I want to see the crossover signals on this other chart. So I want the signals of the crossovers of two lines that belongs to another chart. So we can use the crossover. I don't remember the variables used. It was T3 and T3 fast. So on this chart we can paint the T3 and also the T3 fast. So we can see that the variables are present and they can be used. So now I can remove everything and use the crossover indicator between T3 fast and T3, and the result can be anything. And now we get the signals of the crossover of two lines that are on a different chart. And the other chart can be even from different instrument or time frame. If we are using a different instrument or time frame, we have to take into account that the historical results may be not in sync with the other chart, because there is no relation one-to-one between the bars of one chart and the other, but it will work fine with the real-time values. Let's see now how to create conditions. Let's say that I am not interested in the signal of these crossovers, so we can disable the signals. We can also remove the T3, and if we don't also need the copied lines, we can hide them. So now we have the distance between both T3s. Let's say that we want to use that as a condition. And now we want to add another condition, for example, the slope of a line. For taking the slope of any line, let's say that we want to check the slope of a linear regression. The definition of the slope is the value of that line on the current bar minus the value on the previous or previous n number of bars. To calculate that, we use the slope indicator. We assign a name, so we can assign any name here. And on input series, we select the indicator parameters and line where we want to check the slope. On this example is a linear regression of 100. This indicator can take the distance, take the slope, and also paint a signal. On this example we are using triangle ups and triangle downs when a threshold is exceeded. Let's say that we use a threshold of 0, and we make it to paint the signals. We can see that we get several triangles. Each time there is a change on the slope from positive to negative, and we can see that this small noise is producing extra signals. Same as on previous indicators, we can also use a threshold, maybe something near around 0.5. So we can start with an initial value of 0.5, and now we can see that we get much less signals. If we go a little smaller with a 0.4, now we get two additional signals. We get a short If we are not interested in these signals, for this example we only need the slope on a variable, so we can disable the painting of signals. And now we have these two variables, the trend, the difference between a T3 fast and a T3 slow, and the other variable, let's select an easier name, for example slope, which is the slope of a linear regression. Now if we want to take long signals only when both are positive, as we saw on markers we have space only for one variable. We have the trend here and we don't have space to add the slope. I want to go long only when both are positive. Here where one is negative and the other is positive, I don't want to take any signal. Only want longs here and shorts when both are negative. For that we use the indicator AND. The AND indicator has space for three conditions. So starting with the first condition, slope positive, so we need a minimum of 0, and the second variable is trend, also positive, so with a minimum of 0. We can use a threshold, but for this example let's start with a 0. When both are true, so when both are positive, we create a new variable, let's say C long, and this new variable has two possible values: +1 when it is true, so all the conditions on the AND are true, and -1 when it is false. We get only two possible results: +1 when true, -1 when false. When both histograms are green, positive, we get a +1. And this is our new entry condition for markers. And this is the variable used for the filter, and we want to be true, so we want a minimum of 1. So the name of the variable for the long condition, C long, must have a minimum of 1. And now we can do the same for the short. To copy all these settings on a new indicator, we can right click and set default, so we don't have to type all the names again. So the next time that we add the indicator, we have the same variables and values. We only need to change the name, the color if we are painting signals. Maybe on another video we can show how to paint signals with this indicator. And then the slope must be negative, so we need a maximum of 0. and the same for the trend. It must be negative. Both variables must be negative to assign C short a value of true, +1. Now we can see at the bottom the new histogram is +1 in color blue when both histograms are negative. Same here. All this space on slope is negative, but only here the other variable is negative, so we can see the result. So finally, to enable shorts, we need this variable C short equal to +1. So we go to markers, and the condition for short, C short, must have a minimum of 1. Both conditions for short and for long and for short must be true to allow each side. Let's say now that we add more conditions. For example, we add the average of the volume, vol MA. We need a little more data. And let's say that we want a threshold, so we only allow signals when the volume is bigger than a level. To add this new condition, first we need to copy the value of this indicator. So we use the copy indicator, assign a name, vol MA, and select the indicator. We select a plot style and overlapping the panel number 6. Both conditions, long and short, must be true only when the volume is bigger than a threshold. On the AND indicator we have an extra space, so we can add the vol MA with a minimum value, and we can do the same with the short condition. If you pay attention, on here the volume is smaller than 600, so the condition should be false on both cases. The reason why it is not updated is because the condition must be defined before the AND, so we must locate the indicator above the AND indicator. Now we do a refresh, so now we can see that the result is updated correctly. The reason is because the values are calculated from top to bottom. So if one of the conditions is calculated before the indicator, it is not watching the value. This condition, all the three conditions must be assigned before than the indicator. And then we do a refresh, and now we get the correct values. So now we can see that this condition for long is because this is positive, and this is bigger than 600. The short condition is that these two histograms are smaller than 0, negative, and volume is bigger. The problem is now if we want to add another condition, and the problem is that the AND indicator has all the input used. To add another condition, let's say for example that we add the ADX. We copy the ADX, assign a name, ADX, select the indicator, ADX, and overlap one line with the other. And now I want to add another condition. For example, that ADX be bigger than a threshold. First of all, as we saw, this must be above the ANDs. And now we can add another AND condition, another one AND indicator, which is going to be used as final condition for longs, where the initial value is the last condition long, C long. When it is true, equal to 1, we have copied the last result on a new AND indicator. And now we can add two more conditions. For example, ADX with a minimum of 20. And now we can see that we have restricted the range. This interval is below 20, so we are avoiding this part. And here, only from this bar, we have a condition of true. We can do the same for the short. I will copy the current short condition to create a new one. This is going to be the final short condition, starting from the previous C short with a value of 1. Just for checking, I will check that we have a perfect copy from the previous, and now we can add conditions like ADX being higher than 20. And now we can see that we are removing a part. If we set this violet line to the correct level, it will be easier to understand. Let's set to 20. So now we can see when the line is above the threshold and all the other conditions are true, now we have a correct final result. Now these are the two final conditions for long and for short. So we need to use these conditions on the markers filter. So now we can go to markers. Instead of using the old, we use the new condition for both signal, for longs and for shorts. If it is too much, if it is occupying too much space, we can maximize the chart, and even we can place part of these indicators on another chart, so only holding on this chart those that are needed to paint signals. We have covered most of the most important features. As we saw, we can detect crossovers between two lines or one line and a constant, if we define the constant with this indicator. The lines must be copied with the copy indicator. Any value can be copied from one chart and used on another. We can detect slopes, store that slope on a variable, and also paint a signal when there is a change on the slope. All those variables can be combined into one using the AND indicator. If we need more than 3 conditions, we can nest one AND indicator to another, and with this procedure we don't have a limit on the number of conditions to use. We only need to have into account that when a variable uses the result of another indicator, we must have an order from top to bottom, so the variables used on this indicator must be defined on the top indicators. Hope this has been useful for you, and if you have any question, please post below this video. Thank you everyone, bye bye.